the untold story behind Pope Francis's quietest birthday. Welcome to our channel, where every story brings a little more warmth to the world. If you enjoyed today's journey into the simple and heartfelt memories of Pope Francis, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell, because tomorrow we'll be unveiling another special story you won't want to miss. Thank you for being part of this growing community where stories come alive, one day, one heart at a time. In the soft golden light of a Roman afternoon, Francesco Saravolo stood behind the counter of his newly opened gelato shop, just a short walk from the towering walls of the Vatican. The day was already extraordinary. News had just broken across Rome that a new pope had been elected. Church bells rang out from every direction, and the city buzzed with anticipation. Francesco, adjusting his apron nervously, could hardly believe his timing. After months of preparation and hope, his little shop had opened its doors on the very day history was being written. As evening fell and crowds gathered in St. Peter's Square, Francesco decided to honor the moment with something special. He and his small team crafted their first celebratory cake, a tribute to the man newly chosen to lead millions around the world. The cake was simple but meaningful, topped with an image of Saint Jorge, the dragon slayer, a nod to the Pope's birth name, Jorge Mario Bergoglio. It was a gesture of respect, but also one of quiet excitement. Francesco sensed that this Pope would be different, though he could not yet know just how much. When Pope Francis later revealed his chosen papal name, inspired by Saint Francis of Assisi, Francesco felt a deep connection. Saint Francis, the patron of humility, poverty, and kindness, represented ideals that resonated not just within the grand halls of the Vatican, but in the small, bustling kitchen of a humble gelato shop. That night, as the lights in the square shimmered like stars scattered across the cobblestones, Francesco placed the first cake carefully in the window, letting it catch the gaze of the faithful and the curious passing by. Customers trickled in, some laughing, some wiping away tears, all eager to taste a piece of the history unfolding before them. For Francesco, it was not just about selling desserts. It was about offering a moment of shared hope and celebration. Every swirl of cream, every brush of chocolate, was a silent prayer for a future built on compassion and renewal. Little did he know then that this small act, a cake crafted with reverence and joy, would mark the beginning of a quiet, enduring friendship between his shop and the spirit of Pope Francis. It was not grand proclamations or lavish ceremonies that built this bond, but simple, heartfelt moments. A cake shared, a memory created, a story just beginning to unfold in the sweet air of Rome. As the weeks passed, Francesco's little gelato shop became more than just a place for sweet treats. It became a quiet tribute to the new spirit that Pope Francis was bringing into the world. Inspired by the Pope's messages of hope, humility, and compassion, Francesco began designing each new cake with special themes that reflected the values the new pontiff held close to his heart. One day, after hearing the Pope speak about the plight of migrant children during his Sunday Angelus, Francesco had an idea. That evening, under the warm glow of the kitchen lights, he and his team crafted a series of cakes decorated with tender images of children crossing deserts, oceans, and mountains, symbols of courage, innocence, and the search for a better life. These weren't just desserts anymore. They were edible prayers layered with flavors and meaning, and they caught the attention of everyone who entered the shop. Customers were moved. Some took pictures, others shed quiet tears, but most of all, they felt seen. Francesco knew then that he was onto something bigger than just business. Each cake was a small, sweet echo of the Pope's call to care for the forgotten and the vulnerable. It was a mission Francesco embraced with his whole heart. The themes continued to grow with the seasons. When the Pope spoke about the need to care for creation, Francesco designed cakes topped with vivid jungles, oceans, and flocks of colorful birds. When he preached about hope in dark times, Francesco responded with bright suns, soaring doves, and children reaching for the sky. Each creation was a silent conversation between his humble bakery and the towering spirit of the Vatican just down the street. Word soon spread beyond the neighborhood. Priests, pilgrims, and even a few members of the clergy began visiting the shop, not just for the taste of the gelato, but for the stories written in sugar and frosting. There was a new energy in the air, a quiet understanding that sometimes the greatest messages are delivered not from a pulpit, but from the loving hands of a baker who listened. Francesco never set out to become part of something larger. He was just a man who loved to make beautiful things, hoping they could bring a little more joy into the world. Yet, as he stood behind his counter, watching the light in people's eyes as they saw each new cake, he realized he had found his own small way to echo the Pope's vision, not with grand speeches, but with every careful, heartfelt detail. And in those moments between the swirl of cream and the dusting of powdered sugar, Francesco understood something simple but profound. Sometimes the sweetest revolutions begin in the quietest places. But even the sweetest traditions must sometimes adapt to the harshness of life. As the years went by, Pope Francis's health began to visibly decline. The once vigorous figure who spoke so passionately about compassion and justice now moved a little slower, spoke a little softer. Francesco noticed it too. Every birthday, the Vatican would still order cakes from his little shop, but there was a new request. Simpler flavors, smaller portions. The Pope, it seemed, could no longer indulge in sweets as he once did. Then one day a quiet message arrived through a Vatican aide. Instead of a grand cake for himself, Pope Francis suggested something else, that Francesco use the money and effort to create cakes for the poor. He wanted the homeless, the forgotten souls who drifted through Rome's ancient streets, to share in the joy usually reserved for kings and popes. It wasn't just a request, it was a reminder of who Pope Francis truly was. Francesco felt a lump rise in his throat. It wasn't just about baking anymore, it was about answering a higher call. Together with his small, dedicated team, Francesco set to work. They didn't make one grand cake that year. They made thousands of small ones. Each was crafted with the same love, the same artistry, but sized to fit in the palm of a hand, little gifts of sweetness for those who had so little. They partnered with Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, the Vatican's official in charge of charitable works, a man known for rolling up his sleeves and going directly into the streets. On the Pope's birthday, the cakes were distributed across shelters, under bridges in the hidden corners of Rome, where hope was often in short supply. Francesco didn't seek the spotlight. There were no cameras, no headlines, just small cakes, warm smiles, and maybe for a moment a spark of dignity returned to those who needed it most. As the night wore on, Francesco watched from the shadows near St. Peter's Square. He saw a young boy clutching one of his cakes with both hands, his eyes wide with wonder, his smile bright against the cold Roman air. In that fleeting moment, Francesco understood the true meaning of his work. Not to impress, not to profit, but to serve. The following morning, back at his shop, Francesco sat alone for a moment, hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee. He thought about the Pope, the man who could have had anything but chose instead to share everything. It was a lesson Francesco would carry forever. True greatness isn't measured by the treasures we keep, but by the joy we give away, and in a world too often hardened by indifference, one small cake could still be enough to crack open a little piece of heaven. Even as Pope Francis's strength faded, his curiosity for life never did. Though his doctors limited his diet to the simplest of foods, Francesco still found small, creative ways to honor the Pope's spirit of wonder. Every now and then, he would craft something new, something gentle on the body but rich for the soul. One evening, while reading about the Pope's Argentine roots, Francesco had an idea. He remembered how often Pope Francis spoke of his love for mate tea, a traditional drink of his homeland. Inspired, Francesco began experimenting, blending the earthy, comforting flavors of mate into a soft jelly, something light enough even for a weakened appetite. It wasn't easy, The flavor was delicate, the balance tricky, but after many tries, he finally perfected a cake with a smooth layer of mate jelly tucked within a tender, airy sponge. When the first slice was quietly delivered to the Pope's residence, there was no ceremony, no grand unveiling, just a small note. From one humble heart to another. Days later, word returned. The Pope had smiled, truly smiled, when he tasted it. A small, rare moment of joy. Encouraged, Francesco continued these little surprises, crafting cakes that celebrated not extravagance, but thoughtfulness. Cakes flavored with soft citrus to remind the Pope of sunny days. Cakes topped with gentle almond cream, a nod to his simple childhood desserts. Every flavor was chosen with care, as if each ingredient carried a blessing. The Pope's palate was famously simple, almost severe. Yet, in these quiet offerings, Francesco discovered a hidden joy, a twinkle of curiosity that had never left the aging pontiff. It wasn't the sugar, the decoration, or the richness that moved him. It was the story each cake carried, the love woven into every bite. Over time, Francesco noticed something profound. His cakes had shifted from creations of celebration to acts of devotion. They were no longer just about honoring milestones. They were about preserving a spirit that valued simplicity, sincerity, and the small sacred moments that most people overlooked. Late at night, when the shop was closed and the Roman streets fell silent, Francesco would sometimes sit by the window, imagining the Pope, frail yet smiling, savoring a simple slice of cake in a quiet corner of the apostolic palace. In a world obsessed with grandeur, it was these uncelebrated moments of tenderness that truly mattered. And so, with every new recipe, every careful brushstroke of glaze, Francesco wasn't just baking for a customer. He was writing love letters, in flour and sugar, letters addressed to a man whose greatness lay not in his crown, but in the humble, enduring beat of his heart. The final chapter came sooner than Francesco had hoped. On a quiet morning, news spread across Rome. Pope Francis had passed away after suffering a sudden stroke and heart failure. The bells of St. Peter's Basilica tolled with a slow, mournful rhythm, and the city seemed to fall under a heavy, reverent hush. Francesco stood behind the counter of his little gelato shop, apron dusted in flour, feeling the weight of the moment settle deep into his chest. He didn't cry. Not at first. Instead, he pulled out an old, worn notebook filled with sketches and ideas for cakes he had once dreamed of making for the Pope. Some had come to life. Others remained scribbled hopes on crumpled pages. He turned each page slowly, remembering not the grandeur of the ceremonies, but the quiet smiles, the small nods of approval, the unseen moments that had defined their unlikely bond. In the days that followed, preparations for the Pope's funeral overtook the city. World leaders, cardinals, and pilgrims poured into Rome, but Francesco stayed rooted in his shop, feeling strangely at peace. He knew how Pope Francis would want to be remembered, not by crowns or monuments, but by the lives he touched, the humble acts of kindness he inspired. On the morning of the funeral, Francesco prepared one final tribute. It wasn't a grand cake or an elaborate display. It was a simple basket of small mate-flavored pastries, each wrapped carefully, each made with love. With the help of a friend within the Vatican's charity office, the basket was quietly placed, among the offerings for the poor that the Pope himself had requested years before. No one would know they were Francesco's. That was exactly how he wanted it. As he stood outside the massive square, surrounded by tens of thousands of mourners, Francesco closed his eyes and let the sounds of prayer and song wash over him. In that moment, he realized something profound. Greatness is not measured by the power you hold, but by the hearts you touch when no one is looking. Pope Francis had changed the world not by commanding it, but by loving it, piece by piece, person by person, and in his own small way, through flour, sugar, and devotion, Francesco had been part of that legacy. Long after the final bells stopped ringing and the crowds faded into memory, Francesco returned to his quiet shop. He placed a single photo on the wall, not of the Pope in grand ceremony, but of a simple smile, eyes crinkled with kindness, holding a small slice of cake. No plaque, no caption, just a memory, sweet and eternal. And every time Francesco rolled dough, mixed cream, or folded sugar into soft golden cakes, he carried that spirit forward, proving that sometimes the greatest revolutions are written not in history books, but in the gentle, unseen acts of love. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, we would love to hear from you. Please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. What part of Pope Francis's journey, or Francesco's quiet devotion, resonated with you the most? Was it the simplicity of the small cakes, the unseen acts of kindness, or the way a humble baker helped keep a legacy alive through something as gentle as a smile and a slice of cake? Tell us where you are watching from, and what lessons from this story you will carry with you. Your reflections mean more than you know, and they help us continue to build a community grounded in compassion, humility, and the beauty of small, meaningful acts. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications, because tomorrow we'll be sharing another story that reminds us how, even in a vast world, the smallest gestures can still change hearts forever. We can't wait to read your thoughts and connect with you.